Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining me on the show today.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. I know we're missing Kat, which is unfortunate, but she is, the other key member of NW Living, isn't she?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well done for reminding me to mention her. She doesn't like it when I forget, but yeah, she's very much an integral part of the business.
So she's put you in charge of PR today, then. So I'm excited to have you here, Chris. Been following you guys for a long, long time. Love the work that you've been doing, and I reached out because I was particularly interested in some changes that I'd noticed you'd been making to your portfolio, and I thought it was really quite interesting, especially with things as they currently are at the minute, very expensive. Operational costs are rising, interest rates have been going up. So I was quite keen to have this conversation with you today, and I'm sure that this is going to be a really interesting episode for our listeners because you're doing something that is, I think, to many of us probably going to be quite unique. Before we get into all the detail then today, Chris, could you tell us a little bit about what you and Kat are up to and where you're based?
Yep, so we're based in South Manchester in Didsbury. We're both originally from London. We've lived in Manchester for probably about 8 or 9 years now. And yeah, we invest in HMOs and more recently transitioned over from professional lets to supported living HMOs.
And that is something that we're definitely going to get into the detail of. Really, really quite keen to have that discussion and find out exactly why. And I know I don't want to give too much away just yet, but I know you've shared a fantastic case study with us, which as always is inside the HMO roadmap for our listeners to go and access. But the numbers make for quite interesting reading. So really keen to have that conversation today. So Chris, take us back. Let's talk about strategy to kick things off because it didn't all start, like you say, with where we are now, which is supported living. I think actually it started for you doing your kind of living in your own HMO. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when I moved up from London, it was first of all, I suppose, quite surprised at the property prices in Manchester versus London and was keen to take advantage of those. So I brought a property probably after 6 months of living here and decided after watching too many episodes of Homes Under the Hammer that I wanted to do a big refurb project, and having no experience of that and no connections in Manchester, it turned out a bit of a nightmare to manage, but we got there in the end. We actually added some value to the property, so it was a good news story in the end. But the best thing about it was I was able to move 3 mates in to live with me. So yeah, we lived in that house for 2 years together, 2 or 3 years. And I suppose at that point I didn't know what HMO was or what Article 4 was, but I since learned that it was HMO in Article 4 area, which you're not obviously allowed. So so yeah.
So we've kicked off today's episode with an illegal HMO. Well, at least now you know, and I'm sure nobody was hurt in the process. And then not long after, obviously with Kat, she didn't necessarily want to be just a roommate in your HMO, so you guys decided to get another place together, did you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it did come up in conversation, but I guess she politely declined the invitation to move in. So yeah, we moved out, bought a place together. Again, a refurb project, but this time with Kat alongside me, and I had a few more connections. She's very much more detail focused, so managed the project a lot smoother than I did. So yeah, got a lovely home together, and then I had the rental income from the first property to support us as well, which sparked our interest then in property investing. And when we saw the money that we'd made from the 2 refurbs plus that income that we had coming in, it was that point I think Kat was advertised something on Facebook, join our free seminar, come along. And a moment I'll always really remember because I couldn't believe that what you could do within property, that even a remortgage, something as simple as that, I just didn't know that existed. So yeah, that really sparked our interest at that point and was the start of what we'd term as more professional investing from that point on.
And was that an objective of yours? Did you sit down and decide, what, we're going to turn this into a full-time affair? We want to grow a business of a certain size and scale. Was it driven by wanting to maybe leave your jobs? What was the driving force there?
So for us, the main goal has always been to be able to spend more time with family. So our family's in London, we're in Manchester, so we didn't necessarily want the constraints of a 9 to 5 in the office, and equally having what we do have now, 2 young kids. We wanted to be able to spend as much time with them as possible. So it was really around replacing incomes, and because of that, our goal was then a cash flow focus rather than a capital appreciation, and so we focused on HMOs. I don't think we necessarily we want to grow our business to this size. It was very much a cash flow number that we wanted to hit, which was initially focused around replacing Cat's income, which we set ourselves a goal to do that within 4 years, which was of a 30th birthday was the sort of mark, which I'm pleased to say we were able to do that a couple of years earlier than that. So yeah, Cat's been full-time in property since 2019 now.
Fantastic. And what about yourself, Chris? Are you still working or doing some work, or are you also full-time in your business?
So what we've been able to do is use Cat's maternity leave. Essentially, Cat continues to run the business, but then I can take a parental leave from work. So I've had 2 years, well, I had a year off, then I went back for 6 months. Now we've just had our second baby, so I've got another year off, and we use the property income to enable us to do that and support us through that.
Fantastic. Sounds like a very savvy way of making, the best of what you've got. And it certainly sounds like you guys have done that. So it sounds like you've also been able to do this quite quickly. Certainly get Kath out of her job and into the business full time quite quickly. Tell us about how you were able to do that, Chris. What was the strategy? What do you think the key components of allowing you to be able to do that were?
I suppose where it started was we sold the first property that I mentioned, so the illegal HMO. Decided the best route was to sell that, and we'd realised I think it was about 100k of profit through that, which then that was one pot, and then we, as I said, we learned about remortgaging, so we remortgaged our own home, and I think got about 50k out of that. So we had a good pot to start off with, and like I say, our only focus was then on investing in HMOs. I think as it does for everyone, that money runs out after a certain point, and so we were then looking at raising private finance, doing some flip deals alongside to supplement the income, and we've also retained profits within the business because we've decided not both of us jumped into the business full time. We've retained them profits to then reinvest those as well. So that's sort of how we've been able to generate the funds.
I like to have this conversation with people because I think it's very easy, certainly through the rose-tinted glasses of things like Instagram and Facebook, to think that people like yourselves, Chris, had lots of money to just to draw on, inheritance perhaps, and very well-paying jobs. And actually, it's in almost all cases, it's a combination of being quite savvy with what you do have. It's sometimes having to take a step back to take a couple of steps forwards. By that I mean, sometimes you've got to sell to be able to continue buying. Sometimes it's tapping into private finance, and often, almost always, it's reinvesting all of your profits, cash and rental income and everything that you refinance back into the business. And it's funny, isn't it? Because many of us, we get into this and we say exactly what you said, Chris. I want to do this because I want more time back, and inevitably we get very quickly drawn into the trap of actually having to reinvest everything, not actually taking anything to do what we need in the short term to make sure that we get there over the medium to long term. But I guess that's one of the great things about property. It's quite a forgiving asset class, and compounding, we know is just so incredibly powerful. And I think that those are just important sacrifices that you often have to make in those early days, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I think the perception is very different to the realities of it, and I think people think you've got a load of money, and the reality is we have to keep our living costs as low as possible, and we have done that for a good amount of time. Simple things like, straight away when we looked at it, we were like, if Kat's going to give up work, we need to cut back. So Sky Sports subscription, that goes, and simple stuff like that you think, I can't believe I'm going backwards. Yeah, funnily enough, the two things that went was to free up a bit of money. Yeah, Sky Sports subscription. Then to free up time, we got meal prep. Yeah, so I think Kat did quite well out of that, actually. Yeah, so it is those difficult decisions that you need to make. But like you said, it's not been a huge amount of time that we've been investing in, and we've got to a place that we're really happy with now, so with a few sacrifices along the way, and then you can start enjoying the fruits of that as time goes on.
And do you guys enjoy the process as well, Chris? Have you enjoyed the process of actually getting to where you are, even though you've not necessarily been able to, pick the fruits, for the duration so far?
It's a good question. I think the answer is yes, definitely, but it's not easy. It's been a roller coaster. There's loads of ups, loads of downs. I think a lot of the time, and I know you talk about it a lot, you need to have clear goals and a reason why before you get started, because there's so many obstacles. If you're not clear on why you're doing it would have been easier for us both just to forget it, sit on a couple of properties that we had or whatever, and then, gone back to work. And actually financially at that point, we would be in a better position. So yeah, it is definitely important to remember why you're doing it. And like you said, the property is very forgiving. So over time, you've then building up your assets, it compounds, and yeah, you can, like I said, we're happy with where we are now.
It's certainly on a personal level, the goalposts continually move, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to continually review those goals. I always thought I'm really fortunate because I love every aspect of it. I love the deal making, I love the refurbs, I love the bit at the back end where you eventually do get paid. I like to create great spaces and turn these old places into new things, and I enjoy that whole process. But I think it is tough if you don't, and if you're doing it. Many of us, I think, do get started to replace an income or to create an additional income stream. And I think the people that I've found struggle the most are the people who haven't really been able to embrace the process of doing it and actually found enjoyment in doing it. And I know you guys, certainly that's why I reached out, wanted to bring you on the show, because I can see that you guys have enjoyed it, and you share the process and the ups and the downs of it and things like that. And I think that's really, really important.
I think partly what's probably helped us within it is learning what we are good at and what we enjoy within it. So between me and Kat, she is very organised, very process driven, and so and she loves creating the space as well. She does a lot of interior design. She manages all the refurbs essentially, and that's her bag. She loves that. Whereas for me, I enjoy going on site and having a cup of tea with the builders, and some camaraderie there, which is great. But I really like the finance side, the raising money, deal making. And so it's just splitting them responsibilities, I think, has really helped us to get more enjoyment out of it and and keep going within it.
Yeah, and I suppose that's probably why you make such a great team as well. You're obviously both invested in the outcome, but being able to share those roles and being able to say that's your bit and you're good at that and that's my bit and I'm good at that does make the whole process much more manageable, especially when things aren't going quite as well, which is often the case in property, as you and I both well know. And and it makes everything that little bit more enjoyable, which it is, as we've said, really, really important. And this evolution of your strategy, then, I find really quite interesting. I'm a big believer in find something, do it really well, get really good at it, and then scale it up. But the reality is that sometimes it's not quite right. Sometimes what we want on a personal level changes. Sometimes our environment changes a little bit, and certain things need to dictate changes in our strategy and our goals. And you guys, you've been through this process of starting out with professional HMOs, and then you've moved into some commercial to resi developments and scaling things up, and then now you found yourselves actually really focusing on the supported living sector, haven't you? And I'm keen to know why. What has driven that change for you guys?
So I think the move from your standard professional HMOs up to commercial to resi was probably a little bit of intrigue and just wanting to scale up to bigger projects and finding out what that involved and what returns that delivers. And I think the two projects that we did within that, so we did a pub conversion to a 9-bed HMO and then an office conversion to a 9-bed. We really enjoyed the projects, learned loads from them, but encountered loads of issues as part of it. And we are now better investors from doing them projects. And it was at that point where we reviewed our total portfolio and we looked at it and we thought we need to optimize here because we're spending, I think it's 35k on management fees. So we've always had property managers. We've never wanted, when I talked about finding what you're good at and what you enjoy, we always wanted to have a hands-off portfolio. So factored those costs in from the beginning. But when it got to over 35k, we thought, well, we could hire a property manager to do that for us, or we could look at alternatives. And It's when we sat down and said, well, there's other elements within our business that maybe aren't working as well as we'd like. Maintenance being one, where if we used our property manager's maintenance team, it came at a premium, and I wouldn't necessarily say you fix the root cause of the issue. You just constantly update and plasters over cracks. Not that they were cracks, but the analogy. And as part of that, if we want to really maximize the portfolio, we need to get closer to maintenance or make a change another way. So like I said, once we reviewed everything, we clearly had two routes. One was to hire someone to manage the portfolio for us, and the other one was to look into supported living, where we'd made some connections, but we really at that point started looking more into it. We uncovered the benefits that then offset the elements that we didn't like about or weren't pleased about our own portfolio, and it was a good match, and we explored it further, and then we've really got into it at that point. We've then done 3 more of those deals recently, where they're purely bought knowing that the charity or supported living provider in mind, renovated to their spec, and then handed over. So yeah, that's where we're focusing now.
So let's talk about this strategy in a bit more detail then, and how you guys have managed to make this work with the sorts of providers that you have. So in theory, the supported living provider, they give you a guarantee on the property, do they? And do you have a relationship with them, Chris, where you almost know exactly what they want and need, and do you go out shopping for it, or has it been a bit of a good luck, a bit of stroke of good luck that you've sort of had something that has fulfilled their criteria?
I think it started with having something that met the criteria, and then from that point, so we had one property in particular where we knew, when we looked at the numbers, we knew that was one that we'd be open to passing over, and so all our conversations were around that one property. It met a lot of the needs, and as such, as we were going through that process, we learned more and more about the charity, what they need, what types of property they're after, how they operate, what the elements within their process they'd like support on, and how we can add value to them. And then it's just evolved, and then that was with one charity organisation, but then we found a number of others that we've developed the relationship with.
Fantastic. This case study that you shared with us inside the roadmap is a really great example of how to do it and how to do it well. You took this old, dirty, tired property. I think it was quite a big property, and it was 6 beds already, wasn't it? And you turned it into a 6-bed but 6-ensuite HMO. And I just want to skip to the numbers, because I think that this is really fascinating. You quite literally, I think, have been able to double the performance versus what it would be in the professional market. And I really I actually read this, and I think you'd actually signed in to record the podcast, and I hadn't realised, and I was reading this and probably sitting back thinking, God, I'm doing it all wrong. And this is going to stick with me for a long time, and I think this is fascinating. But you basically took this exact same property and you've modelled it out for us, and you've told us what it would perform like as a professional let. And at 96% occupancy, which I think is very fair, the bottom line profit would be £813 a month. Mm-hmm. On this exact same property that you have set up and are running as a supported living HMO. Obviously, there's 100% occupancy because you've got a guarantee on it. Is it a 5-year contract arrangement?
Yeah.
Yep. Your bottom line profit is £1,670 a month. Quite literally double, which is just incredible from the same property, from the same product. So this I find really, really fascinating. So what is it about the type of property that you've created that these providers are looking for? What is it? The location? Is it the exact spec? Is it the rent just has to sort of fit into a bracket? What is it that makes it work for them?
I think the main thing, if you get the property for a moment and just think what their needs are and where their funding comes from, the clients that they have within this property are people that have come out of hospital, so they are well enough to come out of hospital, but they don't have a accommodation that's suitable for them. So they're essentially costing the NHS £400 a day. So that's in theory what the budget then is. So if the charity can offer something for significantly cheaper than that, then why would there not be funding in place for it? So that's the example that for this specific properties. So we get £95 per room per week, so significantly cheaper than the alternative option. And the charity provides great care in helping these people, one, in just providing good, comfortable, clean accommodation, but then also goes and spends time with them each week and just makes sure that they do what they can to help them get back on their feet. And it may be that they're there for a long time. They may move out of the HMO into other accommodation that the charity have. But essentially it starts from the cost that they're already costing, and therefore the budgets are in place if they can find the right sort of accommodation. And I'd like to say there was a sort of real silver bullet in what we're providing. It is just a good quality HMO. The room sizes are all above 10 metres squared. It's got a big communal kitchen. It's in a good location with good transport links, but it's nothing that you wouldn't necessarily want from your professional let. There are some nuances within there and you learn them. So, they don't want to be, some of the, one charity in particular is, works with people recovering from alcohol dependency, so they don't want to be opposite a pub, for example. There's little nuances there, but it's nothing overly complex. They have more compliance constraints that you need to be aware of, but yeah, I'd like to say it was something magic that this property delivered, but it's not. But the benefit of that it's meant that we've scaled it and moved more of our properties over and sourced others as well.
Well, that surprises me because I had thought that there were quite specific requirements. They need to be very specific in the location, maybe have certain requirements such as wheelchair access, space in the property for a carer, maybe close enough to certain amenities, maybe not too close to where they have other stuff, because I've looked into this strategy before and had conversations, and it's obviously quite a broad field when you talk about the idea of supported living. And I guess there are examples of things like vulnerable adults of all sorts of different types falling into this category as well. Some charities that just house women, some that house people in rehab, some that house offenders, or ex-offenders, and so there's all sorts of things. And one of the things that has often put me off has been what I thought were quite stringent requirements about what these properties needed to be and where they ultimately needed to be. And I've always talked about this a lot on the show, actually. As much as I value the cash flow from HMOs, and that is primarily why I have invested in HMOs, I have never put aside the importance of capital appreciation. And for me, that is primarily driven by the location. So buying in good locations where there's infrastructure, where there's regeneration plans, where young people want to live, where there's a demand for first-time buyers and things like that. I think those sorts of things are very, very important. And I often thought that these sorts of properties didn't kind of fit into those sorts of locations, and actually what you're doing is quite different. And so, I'm looking at what you're doing and thinking, well, actually you're getting twice the income, you're getting all the same benefits as perhaps I would do from the same location from a capital appreciation point of view. You're not having to get involved in any of the management, you've got very low churn rate, you've got one point of contact. It sounds like a complete no-brainer, and if I'm honest, Chris, it sounds too good to be true. Ever the skeptic, are there any real drawbacks to this model?
I think yes, there are, but with the right level of planning and understanding what the charity's needs are, you can overcome them. So, and also you need to make sure you've got the right setup on your side. So insurance costs more because the type of occupants that are going to be living in there. So it's roughly double. Those are in the cost that I've provided. You do have to be conscious that you're going to get a certain type of occupant within the property, but I'll give you an example of, so we actually had one of the properties, a neighbour called and said, don't know what you've done, but you've moved in some tenants that are causing us loads of issues. So instantly you panic, you think, what have we done? This was the first time we were working with a different charity. And you hear these horror stories, right? But we've done a lot of due diligence on and spent a lot of time creating relationships with the charities that we do now. I had confidence of how they were going to step in and deal with it, but this was an example. This was them putting them to the test. So that day I called. This was an ex-offender's property. So that day I called the charity and just said, look, the neighbour's lovely. they've got these issues. What are you going to do about it, basically? And the next day, there was one person causing the trouble. That person had been removed from the property and housed elsewhere, and not actually with the charity, because they'd broken the rules that allow them to be housed there. So if you're the type of person that's going to worry about that, then it's not for you. But we've got a lot of confidence in the providers, and that example gave us more confidence. And a couple of weeks later, I picked up with the neighbour, and they said, yeah, they've had no issues since. And it's the sort of thing that if you ask too many times, I'm sure there will be issues. But the fact that we've not been contacted since by any of the other properties, I think, just demonstrates that it's not a huge issue, and certainly, not one for us. Other challenges: to find the right provider takes a huge amount of time and energy. That's been an issue, and I think there are a lot of providers that have the requirements and constraints that you've mentioned there. Because we had stock there that we wanted to find a match for, it was almost reverse engineered in a way of like, we've got this, does this work for you? But then because we've been able to generate the relationships from that point, then we know what their needs are and we can just replicate them. The other just point on capital appreciation is that we're similar here, and that's part of in the back of my mind, a concern with HMOs. Do they have the capital appreciation of, say, a single let over time? One of the charities doesn't. En-suites are desirable but aren't essential for them, and so with one of them, we've bought next to an area with a great high street, really good capital appreciation. We actually used to live around the corner from there, and we've designed it so it's got one bathroom upstairs for 3 occupants, and then downstairs we have added in a bathroom, but we've done it in a way that if we wanted to turn it back to a single let or sell it on the open market, it can just be removed really easily. So with that, I do feel like we've found the niche of good cash flow for the short term, but then also get the capital appreciation on it.
And then also have a little bit of a backstop or a plan B, if you like, if actually it had to revert to the residential market to be sold or, for whatever reason disposed of. It just gives you that option there, which again, it's something I've talked on the show a lot about, lots of pros and cons of en-suites, but having 6 en-suites in a property that you may want to or may need to one day sell back to the open market isn't necessarily going to be a positive in everybody's eyes. So it's very interesting, and it sounds like you've obviously really thought this strategy out, Chris. I've got a particular question actually around the finance and whether or not there are any limitations or restrictions or difficulties or obstacles that you have to overcome when it comes to financing these sorts of assets with this sort of management or tenant demographic at the end.
Yeah, so yes, there definitely are. So what we set about doing is, I think it went back to when we first started investing in property. When we went on that course and when we went to our normal mortgage broker, they were like, everything you're trying to do, you can't do. You can't have any private finance. And if you ask the right questions to the right people, you can start working through solutions. So we went to different networking events for people that were doing supported living, then found a supported living specific mortgage broker, and they've helped us to find the right products. And the rates aren't ridiculously more expensive than a normal professional let. I think at the time, I know it's not very easy time to compare rates because they change all the time, but we were paying sort of 0.3% more for a supported living one versus a professional let, so didn't change the numbers drastically. One of the key bits on the finance is making sure that the lease fits the lender's criteria. So break clauses they're really hot on, and it's got to make sure you've got the right wording, or if we were to default, they'd want to be able to take the property back. And so we've worked with the providers to make sure that the leases are fit for purpose for the lenders. So we've put our leases past 3 different lenders and tweak them so they're all happy with them, and yes, and now we've got them funding options in place. So yeah, definitely there's some issues starting off, but feels like we're in the right place and we've overcome a lot of them.
So it sounds like there has obviously been a process of a bit of trial and error and testing and tweaking and just sort of redefining things to eventually kind of just find your way through to a place where which lenders like what, which providers like what, and which properties you can then go and do. And that's, I suppose, the perfect combination, isn't it? So hats off to you, Chris, because I think a lot of people probably see these obstacles, and I include myself here, and are put off by the challenges that they pose. But actually, it sounds, certainly what you've described, like there are often some very logical methods that you can go through, and there's definitely the appetite for that there, and unquestionably, the spreadsheet talks for itself. So it's fascinating to learn.
I think there's two sides. And one, we, from like an altruistic point of view, we feel like we're giving back and we're giving really good accommodation to people that need it. But if the numbers didn't work, then we wouldn't have done that, right? As much as Kat's probably a bit more that sided than me, which is mainly more finance focused. But I think it was how compelling the numbers were that meant that we pushed through and overcame a lot of the obstacles. And it's not perfect. There's been a lot of challenges within it, and we've had to refine the process because of that. And I hope it doesn't come across like it's really easy, because it really isn't. And I don't like when people come on and talk about it and make it seem too easy and show off the Instagram highlight reel. But it is possible with enough tweaking and effort.
I don't think you've actually made it sound easy at all. I think, and certainly your case study, reiterates that. I think that the challenges and the obstacles and the hurdles that you've overcome have eventually got you to where you are, and now you've found this. Looks like you found this really good combination that does just work. But I'm sure, and at the end of the day, look, it's property, isn't it? There are people involved. There are going to be challenges. Mortgage lenders are involved. Solicitors are still involved. It'd be fantastic to remove all of these parts from the puzzle, but they are all the chains that the links that do often unfortunately break, or need at the very least regularly oiling. So I think, and it's nice to hear you say something like that, Chris, because as I agree with that sentiment. I think it's a fantastic model. Investing in HMOs, full stop, is a fantastic model. There are lots of ways to do it. It's easy to make it look easy. And of course, we know that that's in a lot of people's interests. But the reality is often quite different. But I really like to see things like this that are well thought out, that have been tested, and then have scalability. And this to me sounds and looks exactly like that, which I find really quite unique. And like I said at the beginning of today's show, is one of the reasons why I was really keen to get you on, because I wanted to talk about this. I thought this was going to be quite interesting to a lot of people, and it certainly was to me. We had a little conversation before we kicked off today's episode, Chris, and actually it sounded like you were probably at a point where you had the capacity to maybe even help a few people who might be interested in getting involved in this sort of stuff themselves, maybe because you've got the right contacts now and you've got the method. Is that something that our listeners could potentially reach out and contact you about?
Yeah, 100%. We're very conscious that we wanted to prove any model out ourselves before offering it as a service to others. So we've done that now, and so we're offering two different services that be more than happy to talk to anyone about. One is for people that have got existing HMOs that want to see if they can optimize them in any way through supported living. That would be one way. And then the other is for the more hands-off investors that would want that support in a turnkey solution of sourcing, renovating, and then arranging the leases with the providers. We can offer that. And the main reason being that I suppose the demand is just more than we can supply ourselves. So we've sourced and renovated and passed over 3 new properties in the last 8 months. We've passed over a lot of our existing, but ultimately there's just so many that we can do ourselves. And we know that the providers have the capacity and the desire to take on more. And by them trusting us, I suppose, with that service means that they can focus on doing what they're good at, of just helping people that need their support, knowing that they're going to get really good, solid, quality properties. So yeah, like I said, we're definitely keen to help any of your listeners, and even just any questions on it. Be more than happy to people to get in touch.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put your details in the show notes. And of course, for all of our listeners today who want to go and have a look and read in detail about your case study and the story behind it all and the strategy and see all of the numbers, which are of course there, including the pictures as well. You've got some before and after floor plans. Fantastic case study. Just head over to the hmoroadmap.co.uk and you can tap into that case study now. But Chris, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, telling us about what you're up to, and certainly at the very least for enlightening me on this area of HMO investment, which I've been for a long time trying to find out more about. And I think you've done a fantastic job of basically just showing us what it can be like and some of the options available to people. And certainly I think you've helped me see that this is a bit more accessible if you're prepared to put in the work. So thank you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you and Kat move on to and do next.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.